Hey there, Rideshare Dan here. There has been some confusion over the pricing differences between Uber and Lyft in the New Orleans metropolitan area as it pertains to rides that go to the New Orleans International Airport or MSY. Now, this may or may not apply to anybody outside of the city of New Orleans, simply because I'm not aware of how Uber and Lyft are handling any other areas of the country where there might be flat rates. But in New Orleans, there is a required minimum fare to go from Orleans Parish to the airport. And Uber and Lyft has decided to handle this a little bit differently, and because of this, it makes the straightforward surge calculations that I posted in my last video a little bit more difficult. And here's the explanation of that I promised in that video. Let's first start off by looking at UberX, since Uber was the first of the rideshare companies operating in the city of New Orleans to be allowed to operate at the airport. Now, $33.85 is the base fare, which meets the requirements set forth by the city of New Orleans TNC ordinance that requires that all rides starting from anywhere in New Orleans to the airport cost at least $33. So you take that base fare, you subtract out the $2.30 for the booking fee and the 50 cents for the rider fee, which is assessed by the city of New Orleans, leaving you with $31.05. And that is the amount that the surge costs are calculated by and your commissions are figured out by. So you have $31.05. I earn 80% of all my UberX trips, so that leaves me with $24.84 every time I bring 1 to 4 people to the airport. And if it happens to be surging, it just multiplies it by that amount. So if there's a 2 surge, you just multiply that 3105 times 2, and then multiply that by 80%, and that leaves me with a earnings of $49.68. And this is how the Uber flat rate earnings are calculated. Let's look at how Lyft handles rides to the airport, because they do it a little bit differently. If you remember in the last slide, Uber handles it by assessing a flat rate on top and then doing the calculations on that. Lyft handles it by calculating the time and distance that you've traveled from wherever you've traveled in the city of New Orleans, and then compares that plus all the other fees to the required $33 that you have to pay under the City of New Orleans rideshare ordinance. In the first case, you see that even with the prime time of $5.01 that's added to that base ride earnings, you still haven't collected enough to meet that minimum threshold. So there is a minimum airport fare that is added to that as well. You subtract out those Lyft fees, giving you $22.65. On Lyft, I currently earn 75% of what I generate with fares. So comparatively to somebody who makes 75% with Uber, you have a slight difference, but it's not that big of a difference. And with me, I make a little bit more, but again, it's not that huge of a difference. However, I get no benefit from that 25% prime time. That 25% prime time pretty much went away. I would have made the same amount of money on the same trip from the same starting point to the same ending point had there been no prime time whatsoever. So that's one thing to take into consideration when you're looking at what the current prime time rate is on Lyft if you're looking for airport rides. Now, let's look at the 100% prime time, and we're going to ignore the tip for a second. I appreciate the fact that they gave me a tip, obviously, but ride earnings was $20.46. Prime time at 100%, obviously, $20.46. Now, look at those two rides. Obviously, there's different times and different distances because Lyft starts off by calculating the time and distance. Uber doesn't necessarily care about the time and distance. Now, I will put a caveat in there that says at the last meeting that I went to that Uber gave, they did answer a question, and it did say that if driving for Uber, you actually had a time and distance that was greater than the minimum required fare, that you would actually get that higher amount. But I haven't seen that in practice yet, and I don't think that's very common. Now, back to the Lyft thing. You have $20.46 in ride earnings, 100% prime time, so you get $20.46 of prime time earnings. Added up, that's $40.92, which is greater than the minimum airport fare, so there is no need to make any additional adjustments. So the total earnings on that trip would be $30.69. So if you remember the last video, 100% prime time is supposed to be roughly equivalent to a 2 surge, and in most cases that is the case. However, in this case, I need at least 75% prime time on a basic Lyft ride to beat that minimum fare. Anything less than 75% prime time will generate that minimum airport fare ride, depending on where you are in the city. And I need 200% prime time to even come close to a 2 surge with Lyft. Now remember, a 200% prime time should be equivalent to a 3 surge instead of a 2 surge. And in the highly unlikely event that you would get a 5 surge to the airport, you actually need a 650% prime time to come close to what the 5 surge would be. So as you see, as you get larger and larger surges with Uber, you need even more prime time to be able to make it equivalent. So airport rates with Uber definitely seem to be a lot more beneficial to drivers than the airport rates for Lyft for your standard UberX versus Lyft. When talking about Uber and Lyft at the airport at MSY, you have to also look at UberXL and Lyft Plus. UberXL is a $50.85 base rate to the airport. So, unlike UberX, where it's a $33 minimum fare, they've made it a larger fare. You subtract $2.80 for fees, and you're left with $48.05, which is then surgeable. Now, I make 72% on UberXL rides. They take a higher percentage if you have a larger ride. So my net amount of money that I make when I take an UberXL to the airport is $34.60. If there's a 2 surge, it's $69.20. If for some reason there was a 5 surge, it would be $173 even. Now, with Lyft Plus, they still start off doing the same thing. You have your ride earnings, which is time and distance. And in this case, of the ride that I gave, in this example, the time and distance was $35.94. Now, remember, the $50.85 that Uber charges to take people to the airport is not what is mandated by the city. That is an extra amount of money that UberXL drivers are paid for having an UberXL. In Lyft, they still only look at the $33 minimum required fare. So, if your ride earnings taking a Lyft Plus is $35.94, that means you do not get any additional money added to your ride, because as long as it hits $33, it is covered under the law. So, I had a ride that was $35.94. If I did not have any prime time like I had in this example, Lyft would take 75% instead of the 72% that Lyft takes, and I would make $26.96. So, for the same ride, same distance, UberXL pays me more money net, despite Uber taking 3% more money from my fees. So, let's look at the prime time and see how the prime time starts working. You get prime time pretty much immediately in this case, as opposed to the regular Lyft rides. So 25% prime time, you're at $33.69 now. So basically, you need 25% prime time with Lyft to equal or come close to an UberXL ride. 50% prime time would give you $40.43. 75% prime time, which is what I got in this example, $47.17. You have to get up to 150% prime time, which would give you $67.39 to come close to what Uber gives you with a 2 surge. Now again, if you remember in my previous video, 150 prime time should be closer to a 2.5 surge. So when you start looking at that, you have to consider, okay, 150% prime time for an airport trip is actually what is closer to a 2 surge. And if for some reason you were to actually try and get that large 5 surge rate to become around roughly equal with a Lyft Plus, that means you would have to get about 550% prime time. So basically, if you're looking at surge rates versus prime time rates when going to the New Orleans International Airport on Lyft, you basically are going to want to have a Lyft ride that's 50% higher than what you would normally do when you're comparing Uber and Lyft surges versus prime times. And again, remember, Lyft does not start off with that higher base fare for Lyft Plus like Uber does for UberXL. So that's it in a nutshell. Uber charges the minimum fee up front, subtracts fees, and then adds surge. Lyft calculates time and distance, then figures out what the prime time rate is, and then sees if you're over the minimum fare or not. This means that Uber and Lyft for regular rides are going to charge roughly the same, but when you start seeing prime time versus Uber, prime time is going to lag behind in earnings till at least 75% prime time. And then with UberXL versus Lyft Plus, UberXL pays more with no prime time or surge, and then the differences are smaller when it comes to prime time and surge differences. However, there is still a little bit of one, and so when you would normally see 100% prime time equaling a 2 surge, you actually have to get a little bit more than 100% prime time in order to equal the amount of money that you would make with a 2 surge. And that is the difference. So now I hope you understand why your Uber rates to the airport and your Lyft rates to the airport are going to be different than what you would normally expect. So again, please remember to click subscribe and follow me on Twitter @RideshareDan and Facebook also @RideshareDan. Thank you.